my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I'm wearing one of the fancy booktube hats, and today I'm bringing you a double review video of two books that I read recently in ARC form. The first of these is going to be Wicked Wonders, a short story collection by Klages. I received a digital review copy of this from NetGalley and I read it on my Kindle. This one was released towards the end of last month. And then the second one is The Women in the Castle by Jessica Shattuck. This one is a physical ARC that I won in a Goodreads giveaway. And this was released longer ago. I believe this was released at the end of March. So starting in with Wicked Wonders, one of the reasons I really personally enjoy reading single author short story collections is I find they make for really wonderful introductions to new-to-me authors. So Wicked Wonders was my first experience with Klages' writing, although all but one of the stories in this collection have been previously published. But I felt like the range of stories in this collection, their similarities and differences, their quirks and fascinations, paint a really compelling portrait for me of Klages as an author. And as a result, I now feel that as a reader, I know and trust her, and I cannot wait to read more of her work. Many, but not all of these stories are speculative in some way. They fall under the umbrella of science fiction or fantasy, though I found several to be kind of open for interpretation in that regard. There were a few where it felt to me like it wasn't 100% clear whether or not the magic was real. One thing you should know is that all of these stories have female protagonists with the exception of one that switches between male and female perspectives. Several of the protagonists are children. Several of the protagonists are queer women. Many of these stories have vintage settings, but even the two stories that are set in the future feel kind of like they're tinged with nostalgia. Where there is magic, it frequently felt to me like the magic of childhood. The ways we can fuzzily remember once believing that the impossible could manifest in our daily lives. Most of these stories hinge not on action or suspense, but on setting and atmosphere. They each evoke a mood, and to me they itched to be read aloud. My personal favorites of the bunch, stories that on their own would have been 5-star stories for me, were The Education of a Witch, the first story, Hey Presto, Calgo Lane, and The Scary Ham. The Scary Ham was the last story, so it began and ended with a bang for me. But there were no stories in this collection that I actively disliked. So I'm going to go through and give you a little snippet of what each of these stories is. So The Education of a Witch, one of the aforementioned favorites. In this one, a young girl sees the Disney animated Sleeping Beauty and identifies with Maleficent and thinks she is just the best. And then her baby sister Rosie is born, and she comes to feel that her toy puppet of Maleficent is the only one who truly understands her. This one was one of the ones where I thought the magic of the ending could be interpreted as real or not, depending on how you wanted to read the story. I loved the fairy tale influence. You know me, I love fairy tale inspired stuff, and it just put a wicked little smile on my face. Amici Aeternum is the first of the two sci-fi stories in the collection. It's a purely personal childhood story within the context of a generation ship's departure from Earth. Mrs. Zeno's Paradox is perplexingly odd, but I found it delightful because, again, you know me, I like kind of perplexingly odd things. Two ladies meet at a cafe and they prolong the social outing by dividing a brownie into increasingly minuscule halves. Meanwhile, the laws of the universe kind of start to go haywire around them. Singing on a Star is a kind of strange portal fantasy. I liked it, but I feel like I might have missed something with this one. Hey Presto, this is another one of those favorites for me, and it was a favorite because I think it spoke to me on a personal level. It's about a scientifically minded teenager who has to spend a summer with her estranged father, who's a stage magician, and over the course of the summer she discovers that her world and her father's are not as different as she had assumed. This one made me feel warm and fuzzy inside because I think in a way it felt kind of personally affirming for me. Echoes of Aurora is a bittersweet, magical love story. It's about a woman who returns to her childhood home to clear out her father's belongings, and a mysterious woman she finds there waiting for her. Friday Night at St. Cecilia's is sort of also a portal fantasy. A girl at a boarding school tumbles into a series of board games that she has to work her way through in order to defeat the Queen of the Fairies and return back to the real world. It reminded me of the way that Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass use cards and chess, although I don't know if that reference was intentional. Caligo Lane was another one of my favorites. This is about a woman using cartographical magic with maps and origami in San Francisco during World War II. I thought it was stunningly good, emotionally moving, beautifully atmospheric. This one you can actually read for free online. I think both on the Subterranean Press website where it was originally published and on Tor.com where it's been reprinted. I'll leave one of those links down below if you're thinking about picking up this story collection and you are on the edge. I would highly suggest going and reading that. It's not that long and I thought it was really good. Goodnight Moons is the second sci-fi story. Like the first, it's kind of personal and melancholy. This one follows an astronaut to Mars and the consequences of her unexpected pregnancy. In Gone to the Library, a girl makes a secret friend, learns some things about mathematics, and comes to believe she can use those things she's learned about mathematics to cast magic that will protect her friend. Household management. I hesitate to say much about this one since the joy is kind of just in figuring it out, but let's just say it's about a landlady who has some secrets. Sponda the Suet Girl and the Secret of the French Pearl has something of an odd high fantasy premise. In this story, two women play an increasingly extravagant series of pranks on a would-be thief. Woodsmoke, I think, is the one that has not been published before and is new in this collection. It also struck me as possibly the longest story, although I don't know the page count on that, so I'm not certain. It's about a girl who makes a special friend during a long summer away at camp. And it's a lot about gender identity and expression in the context of a coming-of-age story. And then the Scary Ham, which is the final story. Apparently, according to the author's notes, this one is completely non-fictional memoir, which just goes to show that life can indeed sometimes be stranger than fiction. It's hilarious and bizarre. I think it's the only comic piece in the collection, and I thought it was the perfect way to end the book. One regret that I have is that I did not realize that there were author's notes for every story at the end of the book. I do wish I had read the notes for each story as I went instead of reading them all at the end, because they're a fascinating glimpse into Ellen Klages' writing process and her eclectic sources of inspiration for these stories. So in case you can't tell, I really liked Wicked Wonders. I gave it a 4-star rating on Goodreads, and I liked it enough that when I finished it, I almost immediately went out and purchased Passing Strange, which is her new book from the Tor.com novella line. Apparently characters from both Caligo Lane and Hey Presto appear in this one, and since those were two of my favorite stories in Wicked Wonders, I'm very excited to read this soon. And next I'm going to talk about The Women in the Castle by Jessica Shattuck. This is a historical fiction novel, and on a personal note, I'm not entirely sure why I keep thinking that reading more serious mainstream fiction, I keep trying to do my quote marks, serious mainstream fiction on occasion is going to make me happier. It rarely does. I'm gravitating towards SFF and related books more and more these days. But that's kind of neither here nor there. I'm still going to give you a fair and thorough review of this book. The Women in the Castle follows 3 women, primarily in the aftermath of World War II in Germany, though it includes significant portions that flash backwards in time. It's basically a character study into each of these women's lives, their backgrounds, how they were able to perceive the events of Nazi Germany, and how they view and judge each other in the wake of those events. Marianne von Linkenfels is the central character who connects these women's lives. She comes from a liberal, intellectual, aristocratic background, and supported her husband and the men of his cohort in a resistance effort against Hitler for which all of the men of the group were executed. She once made a promise to provide for the wives and children of the resistors should their attempt fail, which is how she ends up shepherding the other 2 women, Benita and Anya, and their children into her well-intentioned but overbearing care in the dilapidated castle of the title. Marianne's a really tricky character. She may have lost her husband and fallen on relatively hard times, but she's extremely fortunate to have come through as unscathed as she is. I mean, she has a castle, and she knows this, of course, but she doesn't really get it. And she kind of proves herself to be incapable of truly putting herself in the shoes of others who haven't had the same luxury that she's had to be able to hold a moral high ground from the start. So as well-intentioned and heroic as she is, and the book doesn't dispute her heroism, Marianne's personal failings are more central to the story. Actually, interestingly, towards the end of the book, there is a mention of a whole biography that's supposedly being written of Marianne and her role in the resistance. Her actual role in the resistance, which makes her a hero, is barely touched upon in the majority of this narrative, though, and I think that's on purpose. She's a character who's accepted as politically heroic, but isn't put on a pedestal by the author. Benita's and Anya's backstories unfold in their own due time. Marianne and Benita have known each other since before the war, and Marianne has reasons for not approving fully of Benita. And Marianne's obsession with Benita's husband's heroism ends up over the course of the book stifling Benita, who comes from a humble background, was never particularly politically motivated herself, and who, of the 3, seems actually by far the most capable of forgiveness and beginning anew. Anya, on the other hand, is a mystery until later in the book, but her perspective is a necessary one, though hard to stomach in a book that is examining some of the morality of German life during the Nazi regime. So for me personally, knowing that this was a story about 3 women, all of them mothers, in the aftermath of World War II, I think I was hoping for a more redemptive story about female relationships, but that's not really what this book is, and I'll admit that it was possibly naive of me to hope for that, given the historical subject matter. This book probably needs to be as tragic and at times hard to swallow as it is, and the characters as flawed and hard to love and hard to forgive as they are. I haven't read a lot of similar types of books to compare this to, so I'm not sure I can really comment on its quality as, say, a fictional representation of Nazi Germany, or how it compares to other popular World War II novels that have been published recently. There are comparisons floating around. For my personal reaction to this, I gave it a 3-star rating. So that was my double book review for the day. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you've read either of these, if you're planning on reading them, what your thoughts are. Anyhow, I hope you're having a nice day. That is all. Bye for now.